Good morning, everybody, and welcome to American Scouser's Morning Coffee. And I have my coffee right here with the grumpy mug and or tea with AmericanScouser.com. And we have the cat dad in effect again with Monday. Mecca is back. What is in there? Alan is up. I honestly did not know, was not sure how many people would be up with us this morning. I mean, I don't know if we consider us up, but how are we doing today, Mecca?
Yeah,
about the same.
No,
yeah,
that
about sums it up. Yeah.
It's Monday and Labor Day, and I can't even stay asleep. Like I was up at 6:30, which is ridiculous. Can't wake up during the work days. Can't stay asleep during the off days.
I honestly, part of the reason I'm keen on doing this is mainly because it forces me to wake up in one form or the other. Sparky says good afternoon, which means Sparky is still on vacation. He'll be back shortly. Since he's saying afternoon, he was still in the old country. I think he said he was coming back sometime beginning of September. So looking forward to Sparky waking up with us early in the mornings. See if he makes the morning ones. But good morning, Sparky. So not a lot of headlines. I guess the biggest one that's Liverpool related is the third kit is out. I actually, before we even get to, I love this thing. Kind of like my favorite color overall, petroleum green or whatever. I don't know what they're calling this, but I think that's what it's kind of like called. Good accents, like it. I know Nike haters won't like whatever Nike does, but you like it? This is Macca's kind of thing.
Nope, it looks like a cheap boiled candy that tastes of shampoo.
What?
I don't like that color whatsoever.
Really? Why? Like the colors are not your thing?
Yeah, I just don't like that color at all.
Oh,
it
dude,
just puts me on. And then the contrast with what is it, pink or peach or whatever.
I can't tell if that's the same color that was the collars last year, like the collar and the sleeve, like the ringers, if you will. Because if it is, it's nicer. This looks a bit more pinkish. I'd rather have that coral color. This is gonna be like, we should have brought Mateusz on this morning since we're talking so much fashion.
Yeah, he's the fashion king. But in Ireland, way back when we had half pennies as well as pennies, you could get like these really cheap boiled sweets. And they were always this sort of green, mucusy, snotty kind of color. And you could get, so for 10 cents, you could get 20 of them because they were a half cent each, so to speak. And they were cheap. They were from like Poland or somewhere like that, or Czechoslovakia or somewhere out in the Eastern Europe, because they were dirt cheap. And they tasted of shampoo. It was like getting a bottle of Head and Shoulders.
But you somehow kept buying them.
They were cheap. Did you not get that part?
Candy. Sparky agrees with you. Really?
Like people from our side of the world, we understand this. It just
you mean being that side of the world, you guys have no sense of fashion. Is that what you're saying?
Our taste, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the color when all these rumored kits come out. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that is going to be sweet. Definitely getting that. I still have. For Christmas last year, I got each of the jerseys because it's a safe bet for the family, And I literally, like all the Christmas gifts, that one is still sitting next to my desk right here, the yellow one, because I just can't get myself to wear it. I was kind of hoping there would be a game like that would sell me the jersey where I would be like, because of that game, I'm wearing it kind of deal. But I can't recall a game that made me wear that. So I'm going to have to pass. I'm hoping I can swap it with somebody.
For me, Liverpool's kit colours are always red, white, or yellow. That's what I grew up with, and in fact, not even that, because we never had third kits for a long time. So it was either red and white or red or yellow, and anything green was on Ray Clements or Bruce Grobbelaar. That's me. I'm old school like that.
Yeah, that sounded extremely old.
None of this weird colored nonsense.
I don't know. These clubs have to make some money somehow, because I think, and here's another deal. I mean, I think I own only, and some of them I got afterwards, like up until maybe, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, I own only one home jersey, just because I feel like they're always very similar. Whereas I do like the second and third kits, because like last year's second kit and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, like I like those a lot more just because they're different. But I understand, like when you look at it old school way, because I hate like what happens, like if you look at Liverpool actually doesn't do a bad job. They don't mess around too much, but like back home, like Fenerbahce's home jerseys, and it's called the classic stripes because that's what it is. It's like their old school thing, and they're trying to change it every year. And this year they put some white lines in there. It looks like a freaking pajama. It's almost like, man, I wish you guys never touched the home kits, and then just keep changing the second and third kits. Get your money that way, but money has to be made somehow, my friend. So we released 3 jerseys. There's a 4th one now that usually comes out somewhere in the second half of the season. They might wear it one game, or it might just be for shits.
Yeah, because the club loves us so much, they want to take more of our money for one jersey that will be played worn in one game.
It's all about
feel the love.
Feel the love is right. Another news is Fabio Carvalho's injury updates. It's not as bad as I guess we would have been. Whoa, that's too much of us right there on camera. It's not something that was not serious. Yeah, I know he said like during the game, right after the game, he said it was a dead leg. I'm assuming he won't be risked any like too soon. It's not like especially as people come back, like seeing Jota back was good and stuff. I almost like don't want to go into the game too much. I'm sure we'll analyze the hell out of it tonight with the boys on Monday Night Podcast. But what did you think of Carvalho's performance, or what he was doing?
It was good, but it was a very physical Everton team, and I think we talked before, maybe on Thursday, it was about the slightness of players like Carvalho having to not beef up, but like get used to that. But it was a frustrating game, so I don't think anybody really comes out of that game with great credit. I don't see where maybe Bobby in the second half, but Carvalho, he did okay. Him and Elliott, they put a dead leg. That's like, come on, rub some Brillo pads on it and get back on the field, you wimp.
Yeah, spray the shit out of that thing. They used to spray the knee like crazy. You could after the game, it felt like it had actually fallen off during the game, but at least during the game you could play. It was so freaking frozen and numb. Ellen says mine was make a new jersey every month. Gally doesn't hate them, but Kelly loves it, and we know who rules that household. So hence there's an order being placed. It's getting like American football. You never know what kid they'll be wearing each game, says Sparky. Like I say, I don't mind it as much. Initially, though, I'll admit I was more like you. I was like, what is this comedy? There's like, where the hell did this color come from and stuff? But I mean, every club I would assume has some colors that they're not going to go anywhere near. I mean, I don't know if we will have like a blue jersey, if you will, for example. Like Fenerbahce won't have anything red ever. So there are things like that, but yeah, I know what you mean. Initially, I was kind of like, I don't know about this. But after a while, I was like, you know what? This is actually nicer because you get to be able to wear different colors and represent the same. You don't have a closet of just red stuff where you can just wear different colors occasionally.
Yeah, but they also sell the training kits as well, like the training tops.
Yes.
And all that kind of, you know what I mean? Like, are we going to get the ball boys tracksuit tops as well soon? Like, just let's
it's a nice color.
Yeah, let's get some more gear out there for the Liverpool fans to pay for. You can get your own name on your ball person t-shirt.
It's at moments where Bickler is up this early. Actually, he says people argue about kids, then insist I'm the grumpy one. That's one thing, is like the ridiculous arguments that people get into it. I mean, I think this should be the extent of a discussion. Like, you like it? No, I like it. It's like, because it's usually about the colors. And then, I love when people are like, not big on the stitching that's over here in the corner. I mean, okay, then don't buy it. There's no way they can come up with a jersey where everybody's like, we're in love. Everybody's not going to like something. It's fashion.
To be fair, stitching for me is usually the same kind of stitching you get on a tent. So I've never complained about that, to be fair, for the jerseys I have to wear. But no, I just don't like this one. It's just the color of it. It just reminds me of.
I think that's what mostly it is. It's the colors.
It just reminds me of the disappointment you got of buying those 20 half-penny candies, and then
you're more having flashbacks.
A mouthful of PTSD from a mouthful of shampoo.
Yeah, yours is more of like a personal experience.
I'm going to therapy straight after this podcast.
About candy. Hey, Bickler has a lot of recommendations on therapist. Some guy who might need a therapist, I think personally, but Wolves are looking into is Diego Costa. This is a name that actually we came towards the end of the live watch along yesterday. Could have been easily added to the question of who would you have with like Neymar and stuff we were talking about. What are your? I can't stand him, but I feel like he's one of those guys you like when he's on your team. So I don't know, like it would be one of those where I'd be like, oh, this guy again, but then it wouldn't be as bothering me if he was playing for my team. What do you make of that? I mean, he has been kind of semi out of action playing in Brazil and stuff, but
I think, like, I mean, what is he? He has to be over 30 at this point. I know he
oh,
started
he's
late.
well over 30. I'll ask Uncle Google.
He started late though in his career. He's like Jamie Vardy. He didn't become a professional player, if I remember, till like fairly late on, like early 20s rather than like 18, 19. So his body probably isn't as beat up as a lot of his peers. I liked him as a player, I have to say, even at Chelsea, because as we said in the watch along in the first half that I was at, like there's some players that are just really annoying, but they're great when they're really annoying for your team. And if he had replaced, if in a complete alternate universe, if he had replaced Suarez at the end of 2014, we brought him in instead of Balotelli, we'd have loved him. He would have been torture for every team we ever played against. Although I still remember the biggest thing for Diego Costa is the standoff he tried to have with Jordan Henderson. Like I think that was the genesis of Jordan Henderson becoming Liverpool's captain, because he just was given no F's whatsoever to Diego Costa. But in terms of player, yeah, I mean, I'd still have Neymar, because Neymar is just a huge talent, as annoying as he is. But Diego Costa, I would have a second above who do we say, Richarlison and Fernandes. Just number one, he's a striker and a goal scorer, and number two, he really does love getting under people's skin. Yeah, and I love that. Like I loved Bellamy for that when he was there. I loved Suarez for that. I loved, like, I know we don't say it enough, but like John Aldridge way back when he played, he was that player. He got under people's skin and he loved doing it. Like I loved it. I loved watching him playing for Ireland doing that. I remember he scored. We played Malta. Ireland played Malta in a qualifier for the World Cup in 1990, and there was an own goal scored, and he ran over to the poor player. The poor Maltese player was like on the ground, on his knees, hands and head, and John Aldridge went over and ruffled his hair and said thanks. And you just love to see that kind of stuff.
Only you.
I'm a bit of a sadist, to be fair.
Well, Sparky Parky, so he is on his way. He says, bye, guys, flight is boarding. So he will be in the mornings with us pretty soon. Baker says Costa would have to switch his nationality back to Brazilian so he can be Portuguese adjacent. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I would as much as I hate Costa, I mean, I guess I would definitely take him over Neymar. I can't find anybody that I would not take over Neymar at this point, to be honest. But I think, yeah, if he's on your team, you will like the work rate and the hustle he puts and the shithousery he brings and the harassment he brings to the opposing center backs. He's the kind of guy that I would hate playing against. He's always going to get that late kick in once you clear the ball and just do like shit like that, just bump you out of unnecessarily and stuff, but get under your skin. And the dude can finish. And obviously, as desperate as Wolves are, and as much as they struggle, even without the injuries in terms of scoring, I think, it's probably a smart move for them. I'm sure they hate the fact that, they have to be on the search after the first over here, but because it really limits what you can do, because obviously it has to be somebody on the free, which means it wasn't somebody in demand over here overall. I guess we should probably talk about a little bit about some of the murals being destroyed over the weekend and stuff like that. When did this happen? Al Moa says Turkish fan storms the pitch and fly kicks the Beşiktaş player with Everton flap Cenk Tosun caught in the crossfire while two players are sent off, and ugly scenes. Really? I was watching that game, but I must have turned it off right before that shit happened. It was already getting ugly. One guy saw a red card, which he had it coming because he was getting agitated and stuff. By the way, Beşiktaş has become a Premier League ex-player haven with the likes of Cenk Walkhurst, I think, who was at Burnley. Dele Alli is over there. I was like, it's the who's who of old Premier League players. I should say not old necessarily, more like ex Premier League players, which I think is a smart move overall. Aside from Cenk Tosun, whose career is pretty much done, I don't ever see him going back out of Turkey again. A lot of the players they brought look like yesterday are guys who, if they have a good season, they have a shot at coming back, like Dele Alli or somebody like that. If he did good, somebody might give a shot at him, maybe somebody who's just getting promoted to the Premier League or something like that. But going back to that ordeal with the because the Turkish fans storming the pitch, sadly, is not a big headline. Probably we could make that a headline every Monday. The murals being, I'll be shocked. I'll be honest. I'm more shocked that it doesn't happen more frequently, as much as how drunk people get and what they do. What do you make of that story? I mean, like I say, I find it shocking. We're talking about like Turkish fans. Maybe I'm used to kind of like this hooliganism from back home a bit more, but I'm shocked it doesn't happen more often, to be honest.
Well, I mean, people from who are actually from Liverpool fans from actual Liverpool will probably say my perception is skewed a little bit. But I grew up like in the 80s, and the whole thing, especially around Hillsborough, was of a city who were like divided by the soccer, but just purely for what happened on the field, but still united as a city. Maybe because like the whole Thatcherism thing was still full on at the time. But the negativity that crept into Everton fans since maybe the mid 90s or so, like it doesn't surprise me at this point that you're like they're a very rabid bunch, Everton fans. And I know we have the thing with the coach, was it the Manchester City coach that had the window broken or something like that a few years ago?
Oh, yeah.
But it's not something you associate with Liverpool fans per se. I think Liverpool fans around the ground are fairly well self-policing. The away fans are fairly well. I mean, we've had our fair share of drama and troubles in our history on a big scale. I think Liverpool fans from the area are fairly good at policing Liverpool fans and making sure that there's good behavior. But you go back to like I think it was like 2013, when Everton were in Europe, and some lad came down to try and throw punches at a steward or something like that with his child in his hand. It was a famous thing, like for a while, like on Facebook and Twitter and all that. He had his child in his hand. He was trying to throw digs at like some steward or something like that. You can't think of a Liverpool, like if that happened at Liverpool, it'd be unusual, but you just expected it from Everton. Like there's just something about them, like the bitterness that it's inexplicable, because it's almost I don't want to say, it's almost like Rangers fans in Scotland or Celtic fans even to make it fair, defining themselves by the other club rather than just going on their own path. Like, we don't define ourselves as Liverpool fans in relation to what Everton are doing. We don't care. We're going for Champions Leagues and Premier Leagues and as many trophies as we can. Whereas Everton just want to beat us twice a year and do anything they can to stop us from I'm sure Man United's viewership goes up every time Man United play Liverpool, because most of them are Everton fans watching and hoping United can beat Liverpool. Like it's
is that more like a big brother, little brother thing, basically?
It could be. Like I know, but I mean that would always have been there since like the split way back in 1892. Like, but it just never. Like, I was friends with Everton fans growing up, and we had the usual like you would have with your brother, like a friendly sort of banter that went on, but it was never vicious, and that kind of happened like in the 2000s maybe. Like it kind of came more to fruition, but there used to be newspaper articles all the time when Everton Liverpool played, like kind of eulogizing. Not eulogize is probably the wrong word to put it, but talking about how Liverpool and Everton fans were sitting together. Like, you wouldn't see red and then blue and then red. You'd see red and blue mixed in the crowd, whether it was at Anfield, Wembley, or
green, like petroleum green jerseys then, or
no. We were too sensible then. I can't remember the name of Everton's ground now. I think it's the local park, something like that. But yeah, so there was a time when Everton fans and Liverpool fans were famed for putting rivalries aside outside of the soccer like arena, outside of the game, and being neighbors and brothers and sisters and fathers and kids and all that kind of stuff. But this nonsense, like, it's just vicious now at this point. It's almost like they're geared towards hatred of Liverpool rather than they are supporting their own team, which makes sense given the reputation for booing their own team that they have, regardless of what's happening, whether they're doing well or not. So yeah, it's unfortunate. You don't like to see Liverpool, the city, kind of having that on their name, but it's. No, I don't want to say it's not happening from. I'm sure there's idiot Liverpool fans, but it's not a culture with Liverpool. It seems to be a culture with Everton fans to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's whether right or wrong. Obviously, certain fans, or at least overall in Europe, like, certain countries have a worse reputation for being like more of a hooligan, like destructive hatreds. Like, I mean, I would put Turkish fans in there. I just don't get some of the ridiculous destructive hatred. I really don't get it. Like, I've never been so mad. And like I say, that's probably why I can't do live watch alongs for a while, because I mean, the way I watch games, I get really into it. I'm really passionate about it, but I've never been like, I mean, I might get pissed, throw stuff around, or bang on the wall or whatever, but I've never gotten to a point where I was like, you know what, let me go destroy the stuff. Like, I don't understand that mentality. But I know in Europe, like Turkish, maybe you can take the entire Mediterranean there, the hot-blooded people, and then throw the British in there as well, that have that reputation, like Italian fans and stuff like that. After you left yesterday, we brought my brother on for the live watch along for United, and he had been to the Istanbul final because he was still back home at the time. And, he was talking about how they have separated literally the city with Italian fans on literally one side of the city. And because it's a city and a country that's used to dealing with over the top hooligan activity. So they're like, yeah, why don't we totally separate these guys? Because if they're anywhere near each other, you cannot control the fights that's going to start out and stuff like that. But that's maybe why in my head, I always find it, shocking that this doesn't happen more. And I always felt like within the city, because of the city's history, those two teams have more of a common goal or a common like theme, in terms of like, because of the Hillsborough and what the city has faced from the government and stuff like that. I almost feel like that city has more of a unity. That's probably the only reason I'm kind of shocked that there would be so much disrespect for something like that, and they would do it in return.
Well, I think though we're far enough removed from Margaret Thatcher now at this point. Like, it's been nearly 30 years. So it's not surprising that like there's a generation that don't know that, because I'm pretty sure it's all young kids that are doing it. It's not like your 50-year-olds and your 60-year-olds. It's your 18 to 21, 23-year-olds, whatever. But it's something that's creeping into, because it's something I wanted to talk about today as part of the news. There was an Oldham player yesterday who was beaten so badly by, it seems like, his own supporters after a loss for Oldham Athletic, that he had to go to hospital, and he's out of the game for a number of weeks. Like, I mean, we're seeing, like, confrontations, fans running up. We talked about this before. Like, we might see the reintroduction of fences at some point because we have seated stadia now, because like fans are just taking it upon themselves to run on the field and do stuff that and it's always young fans. It's not your middle-aged, like, grew up with the hooliganism of those days and saw the effect and doesn't want to go back to that. But yeah, it's kind of getting out of hand in general, and I don't think it's fair to that whole Mediterranean area to kind of just say it's just those, because it's happening in England. It's maybe not getting as publicized.
But that's like the only group that you would add. Like, you rarely hear about stories like this from like the Dutch league, or what I mean. Like, you don't.
There's stories from the Dutch.
Really?
The Dutch. Like, I remember the Dutch being and the English having to be kept apart during the World Cups. Like the World Cup, Italia '90 was a great one. And there's a great book about it called All Cried Out. I can't remember who wrote it. It's a really good book from an English journalist's point of view, following the English team. But Ireland, England, and Holland were in the same group with Egypt, and like the tales that were told about how the English would cause trouble, which they did in that tournament. The Dutch would cause trouble. The Dutch would cause trouble with the English, and vice versa. And the great story was that the Irish fans, and we're generally loved all over the world as soccer supporters, somebody tried to start something really minor, and everybody sat on him until he like went unconscious or something like that. I think it was like, because that was the culture. Like they didn't want to embarrass like the nation.
Yeah.
But like Holland has a hooligan, like historical hooligan culture at least. And I think if you dig deep into the Dutch news, you'd find like PSV and Ajax games and Feyenoord games and all that will have stories about hooligan incidences. But I don't even think it's hooliganism, because that was usually concerted, that was usually planned, and it was usually gangs of like the West Ham firm, the Millwall firm, the Chelsea
Is it
shed
just
end,
pure
whatever.
drunkenness or immaturity?
I think it's a combination of things, but I also just think if I'm putting my old man hat on now up here, 46 years of age, never thinking
it's been on all morning,
like
by the way, but
yeah, swim cap. No, but like there's certainly more of, it seems to be more of a tendency to go to violence for young people now than there would have been 20 years ago. It seems to me like, and I've coached in high schools, and I've seen where little banter type incidents turn into fist fights within 10 seconds because somebody took something the wrong way. Whereas, before, when I grew up, you just had to learn to live with the banter. That's what banter was. You had to give it back. And like I was one of the boys, two of the boys schools, boys teams I coached were in bad areas for where they were. But it was just anything would set it off. It was just everything was solved with fists or worse.
See, I only lived in the UK for like 2 years, and I was in London. So I don't know. Is it the same thing? Because I noticed, especially like back home in Turkey, for example, it's a lot of, because like the economy and overall mood of the people have a lot to do with it. Because I noticed like people go to the game angry. This is like they're out, like when soccer is life. And if you're, because of the economy, if your regular week sucks one way or the other, your job, your income, whatever it is, the game ends up being your out. And I almost notice at times people would rather people are almost semi-disappointed when things are going really well, because they can't really have an out. You know what I mean? Like, whereas if the team doesn't do well, it's people to yell at, it's people to swear at. And then, it's almost like they use it as like a release of frustration. And I think that's why sometimes like the littlest thing can set those people off, just because they were already on the edge. That's why they went there in the first place. Is that the same thing you think in the UK as well, for example? Like I say, I only lived there 2 years, but
I don't know, because you were there like the 90s or thereabouts.
I'm not that old, but it was the 90s, sadly. Yes.
Yeah, so I was right.
Yeah, because it was
right. It was me, wasn't it?
95, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so like they were coming out with Thatcherism. New Labour was in government. Things were, as their theme song went, from D Ream of all people. Things were going to get better. Like there was, at that time in England was, and in Ireland as well, I loved living in that time. It was phenomenal. It was like living in the 60s, because everything was, of course. But everything was positive in those days. Like we had money in Ireland. We had the Celtic Tiger. England's economy was booming. We had Britpop over there. We had the Irish equivalent of Britpop, which was called Britpop probably. But culture was great. We were making great movies like Usual Suspects, the Reservoir Dogs. It was just a great time to be alive and to be young. But now I want to say that you might be right about the economy stuff, but from articles I've read in certainly in the English papers and the Irish papers, is I think a lot of it seems to be fueled by cocaine. That seems to be a thing. Like I think I read somewhere they did like a test of bathrooms in sports stadiums or football stadia, and like cocaine residue was found in almost all of them. It's like people are like taking drugs, going to the game. The game is like the hooliganism in the 80s. You're not there for the game. The game is your meeting place for your gang that you're going to cause trouble with, or in this case, party with, so to speak. I've never taken a drug in my life, but I've been around people who have. And if alcohol drops your inhibitions, cocaine kicks it into the next state. So I'd imagine it just amplifies all of the things you're talking about and makes them do things that they wouldn't do sober, that they would just keep in the back of their head. So I think there's an element of that as well. It's I know in Ireland it's certainly a big problem, but it doesn't really manifest itself. Actually, I want to say it doesn't, but it does, because we're starting to see in the Gaelic sports, we're starting to see like a lot of trouble in the stands and stuff like that, which you would never have heard of before. And I would put money that's down to some sort of drug taking to kind of amplify that kind of attitude.
Yeah, kind of like eliminate any sense of common sense at that point, so that you can just like act with your impulses.
It's literally it. I mean, it's like I don't know if it's a problem. That kind of thing is a problem in American sports, because American sports don't segregate fans really, do they? They kind of sit. Everybody just sits.
Not really, which I was shocked. Like I went to a Chicago Bears game, and there was like I think it was like a Tampa Bay game. And there's a dude sitting there, and that was my first game here. And I was like, well, he's fucking asking for it. Because, yeah, I mean, you would not wear an opponent's jersey and sit in the middle of a stand and back home unless, you know, that's your way of committing suicide, which is, you know, trying to collect the insurance or something. But, yeah, because I was shocked. And, you know, you get like, they get a little bit of heckling, but I feel like, because it's not as passionate here. And I think mainly that's because, you know, soccer, it's kind of hard to explain to somebody. And the only way I can explain to people is, you know, because it's like sports is done almost by seasons over here. So, and because there's no relegation and stuff like that, sometimes your team is totally out of it. So let's say, you know, you're a fan of, I don't know, let's say Detroit, for example. I hope Bickler is still not listening because he'll be all over this. But let's say you're like Detroit. You're like, oh, the Pistons suck. I can't wait for Lions season. You know, the Lions are not doing good. Well, I can't wait for like Red Wings to come back and stuff. So like, you know, you kind of like go from season to season rooting for teams. And sometimes knowing there's no relegation or anything and your team is not going to be in it, you can kind of like tune off a season for a bit because, you know, when people are asking me over here, I'm like, man, why are crazy, you know, soccer fans so crazy and so passionate? I'm like, you know, if you're in Chicago, take your love for the Bears, Blackhawks, Bulls, and just, you know, or Cubs or White Sox, whoever you're going with, combine them into one. That's the level of passion you have, and that's what it is. I feel like, you know,
and it's more
everything
or less
back home,
and it's more or less a year long.
Yes,
that's the difference. Like because this country is a 3-sport country, your baseball team could suck, but then your football team could do really well, and then your basketball team could do really well, and then your football team could make the championship, make the playoffs, and get knocked out. But then you still had a good season. Then you take some time off and you do it all again in March, April, May, whenever it is the baseball season starts. And so you have that. You're stuck with your soccer team.
Yes.
From August 15th or whenever it generally tends to start till June 1st or May 27th, whatever, you're stuck with your team the entire year. And it's a long season. And if they're not if they're like Leicester fans now are standing on the edge of the Empire State Building ready to jump off because they've only got 1 point in 6 games, 5 games, whatever it is. And that short-termism that comes with it, because you can't see more further than the next game ahead, because you never know what's going to happen. I think with soccer as well, it's so little. I always say so little happens because it makes it sound boring, but so much almost happens. You almost score. You almost get the 3 points. You almost win the league. That when you do get the achievements, there's a huge burst of emotion. So as I said, maybe at this point, like there's an immaturity. There's maybe drug interaction where like these people are getting that explosion of emotion out and intensity out voluntarily rather than waiting, you know, for it to happen in the sports. But it's a weird thing. But maybe we should go the American way. Maybe soccer should go the American way, because nobody's ever, I think, allowed their impulses to manifest themselves in a violent fashion whilst eating hot dogs and peanuts in the stadium. Let's be fair.
Maybe that's what it is. There's so much food. I've been to baseball games, and obviously it's been really more for the food, definitely not for the sport.
Here's my solution. Less cocaine, more cholesterol. That's how we solve hooliganism.
More potatoes.
More potatoes.
I think that should be it. You don't even have to make a huge tagline. I think it should just be more potatoes. You can figure out the rest. But that Oldham thing, for example, is even... I don't know what it is. It's like frustration over the top, and we've seen it happen before, and people almost think like why would the guy not want to do this? Is the guy's job. Like, who goes to work and doesn't want to do well? And not everybody. You have shit days at work. I mean, you don't want the entire office beating the shit out of you after you didn't do well at work for one day. It's just
I don't, because my office is for 65-year-old women, and that'd be very embarrassing for me. But I'm
a lot
sure
of handbags on the head. Yeah, that could
pretty much, and they have crucifixes in them. But when we've seen that footage, and we've probably even laughed at it a little bit with like the South American teams, where fans break into the training ground and chase the team off the training ground field and all that, and you think, you know, they're all crazy down there. That would never happen here, but it's happening. Yeah. It's only going to get worse unless something's done about it. And that's a society solution.
People are going to be like, oh, they're going to kick our ass. We better play good. I mean, that's more like, I got to get the hell out of here more than anything else.
Yeah, that's what they're going to be left with. They're going to be left to themselves having to play the game. and then they'll get relegated 4 seasons straight.
And that's another thing, by the way, that brings like the extreme misery. Obviously, not every club is involved with that. But compared to here, if your team sucks, you're like, you know what? Let's hope they make the top pick worth it, blah, blah, blah. And you're like rebuilding and all that kind of stuff. Whereas it has a lot bigger consequences, obviously, in soccer, where you can get relegated, lose a lot of revenue. And you can kind of, I mean, we've seen some clubs go into oblivion because once it starts going down, the economics makes it even more difficult, because if you're in a bad situation, if you don't bounce right back up, it's very easy to spiral down because you were built for
and we've seen it. We've seen it with Leeds, we've seen it with Derby, we've seen it with Coventry City, we've seen it with I'm just mentioning Coventry City because we had that trivia question about like the teams that were in the very first Premier League and stuff like that, and also Notts County, which I don't think they exist anymore. Which, you know, I like to always say, like to Americans here, just to wind them up a little bit, where like non-soccer Americans that are like, you know, your sport is a commie sport, and like, well, if you look at how American sports are run, they're actually more run along communist models than soccer is, which is pure capitalism. You do your job well, you get rewarded. You don't, guess what? You're going down. And we don't care. Like, we're not going to put I know there's parachute payments, but ultimately the clubs are responsible for their own success or failure. And over here, you can fail as much as you want. You're going to get rewarded for it.
Yeah, even when fans are banned by the club, their mates buy a ticket and the offenders back in again for the next match. I don't know how they monitor that. I mean, is there like an ID thing or anything like that? I don't know how they monitor that. I don't know. I mean, that's probably, if it was effective, that's probably a good way to, you know, get these people out and maybe put some scare into them. But at least
in the Premier League, and the top and the Serie A and La Liga, I think they can all afford to do fingerprinting if they want to stop that. So you got to
Disney does it. I mean, if Disney can afford it,
Disney can afford it. Like Manchester City can afford it, or Everton. Well, no, Everton can't afford it. They'd have to do manual fingerprints and dusting like it was 1922, because they don't have any money. Do you have fingerprints? Yes. Okay, you're in. That's probably how it will go at Everton. But no, like, I mean, there's ways and means to do it, but whether the clubs have the will to do the ways and means, because it's going to cost them money, and the more transfer fees and wages are going up, the less money they have for other things, which is probably why we have boiled sweet toward kits this season.
Man, I love the turkeys. I'm going to buy you one so we can do a show with those on.
I don't think Home Depot sells them.
Hey, you never know. That's next, probably. You might check out. Well, it's time for the second cup. It's Labor. Any plans for Labor Day? Or
I'm going back to sleep.
I'll
try and get a nap in now. What have I got to do? I've nothing to do today. Just get ready for work tomorrow.
A little
back on the television
announcement. We should do that. This is the only morning coffee for this week, so the rest of the week you'll be drinking coffee without us, unfortunately. I'll be heading over to Nashville. That's why today is kind of a work day for me to wrap everything up, but I get to watch the Napoli game with the Nashville Supporters Club over there, so that should be interesting and fun. Hopefully a good score. Mind you, Napoli is on top of the league now, so we'll see about that. But so no morning shows rest of this week.
Let's be honest, Timuchin, you're going over to beat Naby Keita up. That's the real reason, isn't it? Come on, admit it. We're among friends.
We are among friends. But yeah, it should be an interesting game. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about it on tonight's podcast. Tomorrow,
which everybody should check out.
Yep, 7 p.m. Central. We're live here, so join us, chat along. We'll talk a little about the Everton game, look ahead to Napoli, see how grumpy these two are, and move on.
There's nothing in this, by the way.
What was that?
There's nothing in this. Yeah,
there's like, it's time for gin. Well, that's just
pretending. Now the wife's home, no gin today.
Well, you have a nice nap or whatever you're going to take. I'll be heading to work, and I hope you guys have a great Labor Day, great rest of your week. Join us tonight on Monday Night Podcast.